Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Guys and Magic. This is Hunter coming at you with another deck tech. That's right. This time is a little bit different. We're taking a look at a brand new legendary creature that you can only find from a secret layer drop. And you've probably already clicked on this video because you're like, I know that card. I've already seen the spoilers. And that is right. We are talking about Black Panther, Wakandan King. If you guys didn't already know, this card is coming exclusively to a secret layer drop coming November 4th, 2024. If you're watching this after the fact, hopefully you got your hands on it, and that's why you're watching this video. If not, if you're watching it early, this is what we're going to do with this drop. That's right, we're going to go through, talk about what this card does, and basically all of the other cards that come with this drop. We're going to build a deck around the entire drop itself. So buckle up for some Marvel. We're getting a bunch of it in 2025. And I cannot wait to get my hands on these cards. So hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and let's go ahead and kick it off with this deck tech. So Black Panther Wakandan King is going to be our commander. That is right. It is a green and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature, human noble hero. It has first strike and it has Survey the Realm, which means whenever Black Panther or another creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target land you control. It also says Mine Vibranium, which means you can pay 3 mana, move all +1/+1 counters from target land you control onto target creature. If one or more +1/+1 counters are moved this way, you gain that much life and draw a card. If you guys have been watching this channel long enough, you know I'm about to beat this drum to death, but I'm the counter guy, I'm the token guy, and that is exactly what this deck is trying to do, with a little bit of a twist that I'm kind of playing around with when it comes to putting counters on lands. Just wait until the land section. Spoiler alert, we got some good man lands. But yeah, the really cool thing about this, we got card draw stapled onto our commander as well as life gain. And this comes down super cheap for 2 mana for a 2/2. And I like the ability where the counters are just kind of hidden. And it's an instant speed you can do this. It's not activate only as a sorcery. You can move all those counters from a land that's just chilling onto a creature for blocks or attacks, whatever which way you want to go. I think that's a very cool way to do that. And yeah, so let's go ahead and get started with this deck tech. Of course, I did mention we are playing around with the entire secret layer drop itself. So this is the entire Black Panther secret layer drop. So of course, we're throwing in all the cards that come with this drop. That is Secure the Wastes, Bast's Blessing, Heroic Intervention, and Wakandan Skyscraper. So Secure the Waste, in case you don't know, is X and a white. It says an instant that says create X 1/1 white warrior creature tokens. Very simple to the point. Make a whole bunch of tokens. Bast's Blessing is actually just Primal Vigor. In case you don't know what that is, it's 4 and a green for an enchantment that says if 1 or more tokens would be created, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. And if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put onto a creature, twice that many +1/+1 counters are on that creature instead. Keep in mind with Bast's Blessing though, this is a world effect, which means it affects the entire table. As you can see here, it doesn't say if the tokens would be created under your control. It doesn't say if the +1/+1 counters would be put onto your creature. So if anybody else at the table is running a token strategy or a +1/+1 counter strategy, they get the effect of your card as well. So be careful, be wary, but Bast's Blessing is a very powerful card. Heroic Intervention, it's a protection spell with really cool art. 1 and a green for an instant. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible end of turn. And Wakandan Skyscraper is a reprint of Karn's Bastion. It is a land. You can tap it for a colorless, and you can also pay 4, tap it to proliferate. So get those counters going. Now let's go ahead and move on to the juicy stuff that I am throwing in this deck. But as a reminder, we are kind of playing with a budget. Sort of. So I didn't want to go too high on a budget, but at the same time, we are playing with a secret layer, and it's kind of a premier product. So I threw the budget out the window just a little bit. Normally we do about a $300 to $400 budget, but this time it's a little over. And I don't even know how much these cards are going to be because this is coming out before the actual card releases. So this Planeswalker we're throwing in is Elspeth Sun's Champion. It's 4 and 2 white for a starting loyalty of 4. It's got a +1 that says create 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens, a -3 that says destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater, and a -7 that says you get an emblem with creatures you control, get +2/+2, and have flying. Obviously that +1 is the most important part about this card, making 3 1/1s and triggering our commander 3 times when they enter. Pretty good. Put some counters on some lands. Now it's time for the creature section of our deck. We are running in green, so of course I had to throw in some awesome mana dorks. So Avacyn's Pilgrim is 1 green mana for a 1/1. You can tap it to add a white to your mana pool. Llanowar Elves, everybody knows it. 1 green mana for a 1/1. Tap it for a green. A Delighted Halfling is 1 green mana for a 1/2. You can tap it to add a colorless, or you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell, and that spell can't be countered. Best mana dork in the game, in my opinion. Cami of Whispered Hopes is 2 and a green for a 1/1 creature spirit. It says if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a permanent you control, that many +1/+1/+1 counters are put on that permanent instead. You can also tap it to add X mana of any one color, where X is Cami of the Whispered Hopes power. This is a very powerful effect. Not only does it tap for as much mana as how big this is, but having the ability to go ahead and put counters on a permanent, so that's our lands. So when our commander triggers, we can put another counter. So the synergies are real. Here are some of the creatures that I've thrown in that give a little bit of protection because we want to be doing our thing. We don't want to be bothered. So Giver of Runes, Mother of Runes, both kind of do the same thing. Both cost 1 white mana. Giver of Runes is a 1/2. You can tap it. Another target creature you control gains protection from the colorless or the color of your choice until end of turn. And Mother of Runes is a 1/1. You can tap to target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. So yeah, just tap them, protection from whatever kind of spot removal they're trying to use on us. And Kutzil Malamet Exemplar is 1 green white for a 3/3 legendary creature cat warrior. It says your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. We don't want to be touched during our turn. We're going to be doing cool stuff. So no spells from our opponents. And whenever 1 or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So anything that has a +1/+1 counter on it counts as higher than its base power. So every time one of our creatures attack and deal damage, we get to draw cards. Speaking of card draw, let's go ahead and move on to the card draw creatures. Enduring Innocence, 1 and 2 white for a 2/1. Enchantment creature Sheep Glimmer, lifelink, and says whenever 1 or more creatures you control with power 2 or less enter, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. And of course, when this dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. It is an enchantment. We're going to be making a lot of tokens in this deck. So whenever a 1/1 token enters, we are going to be drawing a card. Mentor of the Meek, similar, 2 and a white for a 2/2. It says whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card. And of course, we're a green deck. We got to throw in Toski. Toski Bearer's Secrets is 3 and a green for a 1/1 legendary creature squirrel. This spell can't be countered. It's got indestructible. It says it has to attack each combat if able. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So yeah, got a good card draw package going on here. Moving on to some creatures that I felt like a really good utility for this deck. This first one is Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. 3 and 2 green for a star legendary creature elemental. It says its power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control, and it also says, which is the cool part, non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. So, Ashaya on the board with other non-token creatures, we go ahead and make them lands, which makes Black Panther trigger. We can put counters on our creatures now, just straight to them. And if we wanted to, we can move the counters from one creature to another creature, draw cards with that, and do all the cool shenanigans Black Panther lets us do. Gala Greeters is 1 and a green for a 1/1 creature elf druid. It has Alliance, which means whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. You put a +1/+1 counter on Gala Greeters, or you can create a tapped treasure token, or you can gain 2 life. Life gain is always important. Speaking of which, Prosperous Innkeeper, 1 and a green, 1/1. When it enters, you create a treasure token, and whenever another creature you control enters, you gain 1 life. Moving on to some very powerful creatures that can produce tokens for us. Adeline, Resplendent Cathar, is 1 and 2 white for a star 4 legendary creature human knight. It's got Vigilance, and it says its power is equal to the number of creatures you control, and whenever you attack for each opponent, you create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. So every time you attack a player, it makes 2 other 1/1s coming at the other players. Charismatic Conqueror, 1 and a white for a 2/2 creature vampire soldier. It's got a vigilance, and whenever an artifact or creature enters the battlefield untapped and under an opponent's control, they may tap that permanent. If they don't, you create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Very, very powerful effect there. You're basically just playing a little bit of a game with your opponents of, hey, do you really want to use that mana rock right away? Because if not, it has to enter tapped. Most of the time they'll say, please, I would like this untapped. You make a 1/1. Illustrious Wanderglyph, 4 and a white for a 2/2 artifact creature golem. It's got Ascend, and it says other artifact creatures you control get +2/+2 as long as you have the City's Blessing. In case you don't remember what that is, you have to have at least 10 permanents to get the City's Blessing. And at the beginning of each upkeep, you create a 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature token. That's each upkeep, not just your upkeep. So every single person, as they start their turn, you make a 1/1. Ocelot Pride. This is a little bit more on the pricey side, but let me tell you, does it work well with our commander? Not only is it count because it's a cat in Black Panther, cat, get it? Haha. It's 1 white mana for a 1/1 creature cat. It's got first strike, it's got lifelink. It also has Ascend. It says at the beginning of your end step, if you gained life this turn, create a 1/1 white cat creature token. Then, if you have the City's Blessing, for each token you control that entered the battlefield this turn, you create a token that's a copy of it. As you've seen already, we kind of added Gala Greeters, Prosperous Innkeeper. Our commander gives lifelink. We got ways to gain life in this deck, and Ocelot Pride also has lifelink as well, if we really needed to. But we have a lot of ways to gain life. We're going to be triggering that multiple times. If we had a bunch of tokens come in, double all those tokens. Ocelot Pride is so good in this deck. Warren, War Leader, is 2 and 2 white for a 4/4 creature rabbit knight. Offspring of 2, so it makes a copy of itself, except it's a 1/1 if you paid that 2. And whenever you attack, you can choose one. You create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token that's tapped and attacking, or attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So we've talked a lot about the tokens. We're also doing the counter thing. So these couple of creatures, they care about the counters. Champion of Lamholt is 1 and 2 green for a 1/1 creature human warrior. It says creatures with power less than Champion of Lamholt's power can't block creatures you control. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, I put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lamholt. This gets powerful very quickly. We can move counters onto it with our commander. And then if it's an 8/8, most of the time, your opponents aren't going to have anything higher than an 8/8. So all of your creatures are just going to get in, just unblockable. Luminarch Aspirant is 1 and a white for a 1/1 creature human cleric. Says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Just a little extra way to get another counter on a creature. Moving on to the sorcery department. That is right, we are in green, so we are going to be ramping. So here are our ramp spells. Cultivate, 2 and a green. Search for your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards. Put one onto the battlefield tapped, the other into your hand, then shuffle. Nature's Lore is 1 and a green. Search your library for a forest card. Put that onto the battlefield and shuffle. Notice it does not say tapped. So go ahead and get a really cool forest. Put it onto the battlefield. Untapped. 3 visits, very similar. 1 and a green. Search your library for a forest. Put it on the battlefield. Shuffle. It's exactly the same. Not similar. It's the same. Good ramp, good. Some of the sorceries I'm throwing in, of course, we have to have board wipes, but I'm doing the board wipe in the way of, hey, let's make some creatures while we're at it. White Sun's Twilight, X and 2 white for a sorcery. You gain X life. There's that life gain even more. You create X 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. And if X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. That's just a... we need to destroy the creatures. We need to destroy all the other creatures. We're in trouble. Same thing with Martial Coup. X 2 white as well. It says create X 1/1 white soldiers creature tokens. If X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. So I love these cards because they're replacement effects, right? You're destroying the board, but you're also getting a bunch of creatures out of it. Moving on to some extra token creation here. Awaken the Woods is very cool. X and 2 green for sorcery that says create X 1/1 green forest dryad land creature tokens. Guess what? They're lands. So technically, when our commander's on the field and we play this card, we can put counters straight onto these because they are lands and they're entering, so they trigger. It's up to you if you want to do that, but it's a very cool little synergy there. Hop to it, 2 and a white for sorcery that says create 3 1/1 white rabbit creature tokens. Easy, to the point. Moving on to some extra utility from our sorcery department. I'm throwing in Requisition Raid. It is 1 white mana for a sorcery with Spree, so you can pay an extra 1 to destroy a target artifact, pay an extra 1 to destroy a target enchantment, and pay an extra 1 to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls. Probably going to pick yourself. Shamanic Revelation is 3 and 2 green for a sorcery. Draw a card for each creature you control. It also says you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. Probably not gaining life too often unless we have some big beefy creatures with counters on them already, which once again another life gain there. But drawing a bunch of cards for 5 mana in green is pretty good. And of course we added the 2 seasons here. Season of Gathering is 4 and 2 green. Sorcery, choose up to 5 paws worth of modes. You can choose the same mode more than once. For 1 paw, you could put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. It gains Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. For 2 paws, you can choose an artifact or enchantment and destroy all permanents of the chosen type. That would be super mean. And 3 paws that say draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Just everything that we're trying to do here is just stapled onto 1 card. Yes, please. Season of the Burrow is 3 and 2 white. Same situation. Choose up to 5 paws worth of modes. You can do the same mode more than once. For 1 paw, you can create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token. For 2 paws, you exile target non-land permanent. Its controller then draws a card. And 3 paws, you can return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it. Yeah, once again, similar to Season of the Gathering, it's doing all the things that we want to do. This one's making the tokens. This one's getting rid of our opponent's stuff. This one's bringing stuff back and putting indestructible counters on it. Yes, please do all of that. Moving on to the instant department. Got to start it off. We're kicking it off with some removal, of course. The premier removal in white, the Path to Exile, the Swords to Plowshares. If you're watching a deck tech and it's in white, you're probably throwing these cards in. They're both instants. They both exile target creature. Path to Exile allows that player to go and get a basic land. And then Swords to Plowshare just lets that player gain life. Stroke of Midnight, 2 and a white, destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 1/1 white human creature token. Beast Within, same thing except green, and it goes ahead, destroys target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 beast creature. And Aura Mutations, very cool, just for a green and white. It says destroy target enchantment. You then create X 1/1 green Saprolink creature tokens, where X is that enchantment's mana value. So these just synergies. That's what we're playing with here. Here are some other instants that kind of produce tokens for us. Call the Coppercoats, 2 and a white for an instant. It's got Strive. Its spell costs 1 and a white more to cast for each target beyond the first. You can choose any number of target opponents. And then you create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures those opponents control. Grand Crescendo is X 2 white for an instant. You create X 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So just a little bit of protection. And Second Harvest is really good. 2 and 2 green for an instant. That says for each token you control, you put a token onto the battlefield as a copy of that permanent. So just double up every token we have. And our final 2 instants that we are throwing in here are just a bit more protection just to save our stuff. If you notice the artwork here, if you picked up the Captain America Secret Lair, throw this card in here. Flawless Maneuver, 2 and a white instant. If you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Love the art here. If you were able to get the Captain America one, congratulations. Teferi's Protection, 2 and a white. Everybody's favorite protection spell. It's an instant until your next turn. Your life total can't change. You gain protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out, and then you just exile Teferi's Protection. Moving on to the artifact department, of course, we're going to kick it off with some mana rocks. As you see, new art for Marvel. We're just trying to keep it on theme, at least a little bit here, okay? So Earth's Mightiest Emblem is just Arcane Signet. You just tap it to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Everybody knows what this card is. And if you wanted, you spent over $199, you get this for free with Secret Lair. Soul Ring, this cool art is from the Iron Man one. It is 1 mana. Tap it to add 2 colorless. Talisman of Unities, 2 mana. You can tap it to add a colorless, or you can tap it to add a green or white. And if you do, it deals 1 damage to you. And Felwar Stone is just 2 mana. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color that a land and opponent controls could produce. Some artifacts here that care about counters. Yeah, look, another Marvel card that fits perfectly in this deck. This one, if you got the Wolverine one, you could pick this one up. It's Adamantium Bonding Tank. It's just the Ozolith, so if you wanted the original copy, just go and get the Ozolith. But I'm showing these cool arts here, so 1 mana. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, you put those counters on the Ozolith, and then at the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith had counters on it, you can move all the counters onto them onto a target creature that you control. And of course, we'll get the updated Ozolith in here as well. It's Ozolith the Shattered Spire, 1 and a green, legendary artifact that says if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on an artifact or creature you control, put that many +1/+1/+1 counter on it instead. And it also has that ability you could pay 1 and a green. Tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target artifact or creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery, and if you really needed to, and this is in your hand, you can cycle it away for just 2 mana. Yeah, good powerful effects here for both Ozoliths. Moving on to the artifacts that care about tokens. Yeah, we are both, remember, tokens and counters. Halo Fountain, my favorite token artifact, period. It's just going to go in every deck. 2 and a white for an artifact. You can pay a white, tap it, untap a tapped creature you control to create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. Pay 2 white mana, tap it, untap 2 tapped creatures you control to draw a card. And pay 5 white mana, tap it, untap 15 tapped creatures you control, you win the game. Alternate win con, very hard to get to, but just the ability to go ahead and untap tapped creatures as a cost is very cool to do. Making 1/1s drawing cards is kind of the 2 modes there that matter the most. And I mean, if you got 15 tapped creatures, then you should have already won. Ghost Vacuum, brand new card from Duskmourn that I absolutely have fallen in love with. It is 1 mana for an artifact. You can tap it for free. Exile target card from a graveyard. Any kind of just graveyard strategies, we can shut it off with Ghost Vacuum. Or you can just go ahead and just exile anything else. Like, who cares? Just exile as many creatures as possible because the second ability is awesome. It's late game. You got mana to spend. You spend 6 mana, you can tap this to sacrifice Ghost Vacuum and put each creature card exiled with Ghost Vacuum onto the battlefield under your control with a flying counter on it. Each of them is a 1/1 spirit in addition to its other types. Activate only as a sorcery. So if we were exiling any cards that have a very cool ETB effect, then we get those effects. And we trigger our commander. It's a win-win-win-win-win for with Ghost Vacuum. The last artifact we are throwing in here is just good old Swiftfoot Boots. 2 mana, artifact equipment. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste, equip cost of 1. Just a little bit of extra protection, just a little bit of hastiness. I like Swiftfoot Boots. Moving on to the enchantments. These enchantments all kind of care about tokens. Rabble Rousing, 4 and a white enchantment, got Hideaway 5. It says whenever you attack with 1 or more creatures, you create that many 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. Then if you control 10 or more creatures, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Really cool thing about Rabble Rousing is that is an attack trigger, which means damage does not go through. So if we had let's say 6 creatures swinging in, we make 6 1/1s. That'll trigger our commander 6 times if it's on the field. Then if we have the mana, we can move all 6 of those counters instant speed onto one of the creatures that's attacking. Bing, bang, boom, boom, boom. A lot of damage. Felidar Retreat, 3 and a white enchantment, landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you choose 1. You can create a 2/2 white cat beast creature token, or you can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Then those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. Good card, good. Doubling Season. It is kind of just the better version of Bast's Blessing because it only cares about our stuff. So 4 and a green enchantment. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it instead creates twice that many tokens. And if an effect would put 1 or more counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many of those counters on the permanent instead. So, like I said, just Bast's Blessing, but better because it's only ours. And of course, it's time to move on to the enchantments that care about the counters. Branching Evolution, 2 and a green enchantment. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. So if we're moving it from a land onto a creature, we're taking those, let's say, 3 counters from a land, putting it onto a creature, and that creature gets 6 counters because we moved it. Hardened Scales, great 1-drop, 1 green enchantment. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are placed on it instead. Court of Garenbrig, one of my favorite +1/+1 counters enchantments since it was printed. 1/2 green enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among up to 2 target creatures. Then, if you're the monarch, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Yes, please, keep going. Got the Arts Crusade, 3, 2 white, enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, including the one that just entered. Innkeeper's Talent. I mentioned this was Court of Garrett was my favorite. Innkeeper's Talent. I love this card. It's probably going in every green +1/+1 counter deck moving forward. 1 and a green for an enchantment class. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. You can level it up to level 2 with 1 green mana. Permanents you control with counters on them have Ward 1, which also counts our lands because they're permanents. And then for level 3, level it up by 3 and a green. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, you put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. Beautiful. I love this card because if we leveled it up to level 3, and if you remember the old board wipe of White Sun's Twilight, that kind of does poison damage, which means poison counters will be doubled up if we get in with some of that stuff, and that's just mean. Our final enchantment here is just a good card, and we need the mana. We're doing a lot of stuff. We had a couple different X spells, so Smothering Tithe, 3 and a white, enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If that player doesn't, you create a treasure token. Everybody loves this card. I love this card. It's why it's in the deck. Here's the moment you guys have been waiting for. It is the land department, but before we get into the awesome man lands that I teased, let's talk about the utility lands. Castle Ardenvale is a land that enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a plains. You can tap it to add a white, or you can pay 2 white, tap it to create a 1/1 white human creature token. Fountain Port, tap it to add a colorless, or you can pay 2, tap it, sacrifice a token to draw a card. You can pay 3, tap it, pay 1 life to create a 1/1 blue fish creature token. Or you can pay 4, tap it to create a treasure token. Gavany Township is a land that you can tap for a colorless. You can pay 2, a green and a white, tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. More counters, please. Minas Tirith enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. You can tap it to add a white. You can also pay 1 and a white, tap it to draw a card, activate only if you attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn. Mirrex, you can tap it to add a colorless, or you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, activate only if Mirrex enters the battlefield this turn. Pay 3, tap it, create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. Once again, we've got Phyrexian Mights that do toxic poison. And Innkeeper's Talent could be very scary. Rogue's Passage. Tap it to add a colorless, or pay 4, tap it, target creature can't be blocked this turn. Here we go. It's the manland time. We're adding Blinkmoth Nexus and Inkmoth Nexus. Yes, they both tap for colorless. With Blinkmoth Nexus, you could pay 1, and it becomes a 1/1 artifact creature token with flying until end of turn. It's still a land. You can also pay 1, tap it, target Blinkmoth creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. That's cool. There are some lands in here you'll see that have multiple creature types, which you can technically do that. But I care about making this with a bunch of counters on it. Like, we don't even have to move those counters with our commander. I mean, yes, obviously we will if we draw cards. But having this ability where we can just put counters on lands where it's harder to interact with for our opponents, and then just make those lands just come alive, swing in with giant lands. It's going to be great. So Inkmoth Nexus is the scarier version. You can tap it to add a colorless, like I said. You can also pay 1, and it becomes a 1/1 Blinkmoth artifact creature token with flying and infect until end of turn. Still a land. Imagine this flying at someone with a bunch of counters on it because we just had creatures enter. That's all you need to do, is just have creatures enter, and our commander just says, I'm putting counters on lands, and then this now has a bunch of counters, and that just kills somebody. Crawling Barrens is really good in this deck. You can tap it at a colorless. You can pay 4 mana. You put 2 +1/+1 counters on Crawling Barrens. Then you may have it become a 0/0 elemental creature until end of turn. It's still a land. This card is fantastic in this deck because our commander can move the counters it puts on itself to another creature, because this says you may have it become a creature. So you can just, if you have extra mana and you're not doing anything on other people's turns, pay the 4, just put 2 counters on here, and then later move those counters somewhere else, gain life, draw cards. Good. Mishra's Factory and Mishra's Foundry are also going in here. They both tap for colorless. Mishra's Factory, you pay 1. It becomes a 2/2 Assembly Worker artifact creature until end of turn. It's still a land. You can tap it. Target Assembly Worker creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. The Foundry, you could pay 2 mana. It becomes a 2/2 Assembly Worker artifact creature until end of turn. Still a land. You could pay 1, tap it. Target attacking Assembly Worker gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Mutavault also going in here. Fantastic. You can tap it to add a colorless, and you can pay 1. Mutavault becomes a 2/2 creature with all creature types. And it's still a land. So just more man lands. Getting into the man lands that actually tap for colors, because you might be wondering, that is a lot of colorless mana you're tapping for. Don't worry. We still have a bunch of colored mana here. Cave of the Frost Dragon is a land that says if you control 2 or more other lands, it enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add a white. You also pay 4 and a white. It becomes a 3/4 white dragon creature with flying until end of turn. Still a land. Lair of the Hydra, same situation. If you control 2 or more other lands, it enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap to add a green. You can also pay X and a green. Until end of turn, Lair of Hydra becomes an XX green Hydra creature. Still a land. X can't be 0. Yeah, so just put as much mana into this. If we had a bunch of counters on this, just boom. Restless Prairie enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add a green or white. You can also pay 2 green and white. It becomes a 3/3 green and white llama creature until end of turn. It's still a land. And then whenever it attacks, other creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. And our final man land is going to be Treetop Village. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap to add a green. You can also pay 1 and a green. It becomes a 3/3 green ape creature with trample until end of turn. It's still a land. So yes, trample damage. Trample through it. With all those counters that we might have put on this. Who knows? So those ones tap for colors. Let's continue on with more lands that tap for colors. Command Tower. Tap it to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Bountiful Promenade. The bond land in our colors. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. Tap it to add a green or white. Exotic Orchard. You can tap it to add 1 mana of a color that a land an opponent controls could produce. Branchloft Pathway is a land that can either enter on the green side or the white side and will tap for the respective color that you put it on. Overgrown Farmland enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. Tap it for a green or white. Sun Petal Grove enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest or plains. Tap it to add a green or white. Temple Garden is our shock. It's a forest plains. Enters the battlefield. You may pay 2 life. If you don't, it enters tapped. Windswept Heath is our fetch. You could tap to pay 1 life. Search your library for a forest or plains, put on the battlefield, and shuffle. And of course, the basics. We're adding 5 forests and just 5 plains. And that is going to do it for my build of Black Panther Wakandan King. I want to know what you guys think of this deck. Did you expect the man lands? It's very cool. Very cool way to do stuff. I love the ability where Black Panther could just instant speed move counters when needed. Moving it all over the place. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of Black Panther Wakanda King down in the comment section. Always interested to hear your guys' opinions. Hit that like button if you like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I'm very excited about all these Marvel cards. I am a Marvel fan myself. And 2025 is coming right around the corner. And we already got Spider-Man coming. MagicCon Vegas will let us know of the entire slate of 2025. There could be more Marvel up ahead. But hopefully you guys got your hands on these cards if you really wanted it. It is a limited run on Secret Lair, so set your alarms. Get ready. November 4th, 2024. They are going live. In the description, you'll find links to all of our social media accounts. That's TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, @GuysOfMagic for each one. Follow us on those as well. And on the screen right now, those are all of our Patreon subscribers. Thank you guys so much for your added support. It really does mean the world to us. If you guys wanted to check out what they're seeing, which is not here on YouTube, exclusive stuff over on our Patreon. It's also in the description. There's a link there for Patreon. Click it, consider subscribing. And until the next video, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.